This is what happens when you work to change things, and first they think you're crazy, then they fight you, and then all of a sudden you change the world.
This is Elizabeth Holmes. In 2015, Forbes named her as the youngest and wealthiest female billionaire, and she was hailed as the next Steve Jobs. 7 years later, she's facing a maximum sentence of 80 years in prison and became the biggest joke in Silicon Valley. Back then, Theranos was a revolutionary idea thought up by Elizabeth Holmes. Her company was one of Silicon Valley's unicorn startups, valued at an estimated $9 billion. In 2015, she was on top of the world. Then, it all came crashing down. The lies of Theranos' technology were exposed, along with the role she played in covering it all up. She was ousted as CEO and charged with massive fraud, and the company was forced to close its labs and testing centers, ultimately shuttering operations altogether. She has been convicted of fraud in federal court. Jurors found her guilty of 3 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. This is how she went from precious child to ambitious Stanford dropout to an embattled startup founder convicted of fraud. She was born on February 3, 1984 in Washington, D.C. Her mum, Noel, was a congressional committee staffer, and her dad, Christian Holmes, worked for Enron before moving to government agencies. Her family moved when she was young from Washington, D.C. to Houston. When she was 7, she tried to invent her own time machine, filling up an entire notebook with detailed engineering drawings. At the age of 9, she told relatives she wanted to be a billionaire when she grew up. Her relatives described her as saying it with the utmost seriousness and determination. She had an intense competitive streak from a young age. She often played Monopoly with her younger brother and cousin, and she would insist on playing until the end, collecting the houses and hotels until she won. If she was losing, she would often storm off. More than once, she ran directly through a screen on the door. During high school, she developed her work ethic, often staying up late to study. She quickly became a straight-A student and even started her own business. She sold C++ compilers, a type of software that translates computer code to Chinese schools. She started taking Mandarin lessons and partway through high school talked her way into being accepted by Stanford University's summer program, which culminated in a trip to Beijing. Inspired by her great-great-grandfather, Christian Holmes, a surgeon, she decided she wanted to go into medicine. But she discovered early on that she was terrified of needles. That was what led her to start her own company, Theranos. She went to Stanford to study chemical engineering. When she was a freshman, she became a President's Scholar, an honor which came with a $3,000 stipend to go toward a research project. She spent the summer after her freshman year interning at the Genome Institute in Singapore. She got the job partly because she spoke Mandarin. As a sophomore, she went to one of her professors and asked to start a company. With his blessing, she founded Real-Time Cures, later changing the company's name to Theranos. Thanks to a typo, early employees' paychecks actually said real-time curses. She soon filed a patent application for a medical device for chemical monitoring and drug delivery, a wearable device that would administer medication, monitor patients' blood, and adjust the dosage as needed. By the next semester, she had dropped out of Stanford altogether and was working on Theranos in the basement of a college house. Her invention was the Edison. Here's how it worked. A pinprick would take a tiny sample of blood from the patient's finger and kept in a nanotainer. The nanotainer would then be inserted into the Edison machine for analysis and produce rapid results for 130 tests. Theranos' business model was based around the idea that it could run blood tests using proprietary technology that required only a finger pinprick and a small amount of blood. She said the tests would be able to detect medical conditions like cancer and high cholesterol. She started raising money for Theranos from prominent investors like Oracle founder Larry Ellison and Tim Draper. Theranos raised more than $700 million. She took investors' money on the condition that she wouldn't have to reveal how Theranos technology worked. Plus, she would have final say over everything having to do with the company. That obsession with secrecy extended to every aspect of Theranos. For the first decade she spent building her company, Theranos operated in stealth mode. She even took 3 former Theranos employees to court, claiming they had misused Theranos trade secrets. Her attitude towards secrecy and running a company was borrowed from a Silicon Valley hero of hers, former Apple CEO Steve Jobs. She started dressing in black turtlenecks like Jobs, decorated her office with his favorite furniture, and, like Jobs, never took vacations. She also put on a deep voice, which may have been part of a carefully crafted image intended to help her fit into the male-dominated business world. She was a demanding boss and wanted her employees to work as hard as she did. She had assistants track when employees arrived and left each day. To encourage people to work longer hours, she started having dinner catered to the office around 8 p.m. each night. Shortly after she dropped out of Stanford at age 19, she began dating Theranos president and COO Sunny Balwani, who was 20 years older than her. The two met during her 3rd year in Stanford's summer Mandarin program, the summer before she went to college. She was bullied by some of the other students, and Balwani had come to her aid. Balwani became her number 2 at Theranos, despite having little experience, and often tracked his employees' whereabouts. They eventually broke up in spring 2016 when she pushed him out of the company. In 2008, the Theranos board decided to remove her as CEO in favor of someone more experienced. But over the course of a 2-hour meeting, she convinced them to let her stay in charge of her company. As Theranos started to rake in millions of funding, she became the subject of media attention and acclaim in the tech world. She graced the covers of Fortune and Forbes, gave a TED Talk, and spoke on panels with Bill Clinton and Alibaba's Jack Ma. Theranos quickly began securing outside partnerships. Capital Blue Cross and Cleveland Clinic signed on to offer Theranos tests to their patients, and Walgreens made a deal to open Theranos testing centers in their stores. Theranos also formed a secret partnership with Safeway worth $350 million. In 2011, she hired her younger brother, Christian, to work at Theranos, although he didn't have a medical or science background. Her brother spent his early days at Theranos reading about sports online and recruiting his Duke University fraternity brothers to join the company. People dubbed his crew the Frat Pack and Thoroughbros. At one point, Elizabeth Holmes was the world's youngest self-made female billionaire with a net worth of around $4.5 billion. Her company was valued at $10 billion at its peak in 2013 and 2014. She was obsessed with security at Theranos. She asked anyone who visited the company's headquarters to sign non-disclosure agreements before being allowed in the building, and had security guards escort visitors everywhere, even to the bathroom. Around the same time, questions were being raised about Theranos' technology. Ian Gibbons, chief scientist at Theranos and one of the company's first hires, warned her that the tests weren't ready for the public to take and that there were inaccuracies in the technology. Outside, scientists began voicing their concerns about Theranos, too. By August 2015, the FDA began investigating Theranos, and regulators from the government body that oversees laboratories found major inaccuracies in the testing Theranos was doing on patients. By October 2015, Wall Street Journal reporter John Carreyrou published an investigation into Theranos' struggles with its technology. His reporting sparked the beginning of the company's downward spiral. He found that Theranos' blood testing machine, named Edison, couldn't give accurate results. What Theranos did was, instead of running the blood test through their own machine, they ran the blood test through the same machines used by traditional blood testing companies and told everyone that their own machine produced the results. Holmes appeared on CNBC's Mad Money shortly after the Wall Street Journal published its story to defend herself and Theranos. In July 2016, she was banned from the lab testing industry for 2 years. By October, Theranos had shut down its lab operations and wellness centers. In March 2018, Theranos, Holmes, and Balwani were charged with massive fraud by the SEC. She agreed to give up financial and voting control of the company, pay a $500,000 fine, and return 18.9 million shares of Theranos stock. She also isn't allowed to be the director or officer of a publicly traded company for 10 years. Despite the charges, she was allowed to stay on as CEO of Theranos, since it's a private company. The company had been hanging on by a thread, and she wrote to investors asking for more money to save Theranos. In Theranos' final days, she reportedly got a Siberian Husky puppy named Balto that she brought into the office. However, the dog wasn't potty trained and would go to the bathroom inside the company's office and during meetings. In June 2018, Theranos announced that Holmes was stepping down as CEO. On the same day, the Department of Justice announced that a federal grand jury had charged Holmes, along with Balwani, with 9 counts of wire fraud and 2 counts of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Theranos sent an email to shareholders in September 2018 announcing that the company was shutting down. Theranos reportedly said it planned to spend the next few months repaying creditors with its remaining resources. Besides the criminal case, she was also involved in a number of civil lawsuits, including one in Arizona brought by former Theranos patients over inaccurate blood tests. The lawyers representing her in the Arizona case said in late 2019 they hadn't been paid in over a year and asked to be removed from her legal team. The trial kicked off in September 2021. On the stand, Holmes said Balwani emotionally and sexually abused her during their relationship. She also admitted that she added some pharmaceutical companies' logos without authorization. Investors previously said they took some reassurance in those reports because, based on the logos, they thought major pharmaceutical companies had validated Theranos' technology. She said she added the logos to convey that work was done in partnership with those companies, but in hindsight, she wishes she had done it differently. She also acknowledged on the stand that she hid Theranos' use of modified commercial devices from investors. She said she did this because company counsel told her that alterations the company made to the machines were trade secrets and needed to be protected as such. In closing arguments, prosecutors argued that Holmes chose fraud over business failure, while the defense argued she was building a business, not a criminal enterprise. After 15 weeks of trial, the jury returned a mixed verdict for Holmes, finding her guilty on 1 count of conspiracy to defraud investors and 3 counts of wire fraud. They found her not guilty on 4 other counts and failed to reach a verdict on the remaining 3 counts. The counts Holmes was found guilty of were all related to investments. She wasn't convicted on any of the charges involving patients who received inaccurate test results. She now faces the possibility of 80 years in prison, with each count carrying a maximum 20-year prison sentence, a $250,000 fine, and a requirement to pay victims restitution. She went from the world's youngest self-made female billionaire with a net worth of around $4.5 billion to facing the possibility of 80 years in prison. What can we learn from her fall from grace? Well, in short, she took Thomas Edison's quote too seriously. "I didn't fail 1,000 times. The light bulb was an invention with 1,000 steps." The technology required for invention simply was not there yet. Sometimes you can be so fixated on your dream that you'll stop at nothing to achieve it. For Holmes, she started her business with good intentions. She set out to revolutionize the industry, to make medical testing more efficient, more convenient, and less painful. However, she simply would not give up on her dream and just covered the inadequacies of her invention with a mountain of lies. Her determination eventually became delusion. Thanks for staying till the end of this video. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to hit the like button, drop a comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more content like this. Also, be sure to check out our other videos on this channel. Links are in the description, and we'll see you in the next one.